Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. With consumption of energy only expected to grow in BC, how can the province meet that increased demand? We'll tell you about a BC Hydro announcement coming this half hour, and we're taking your calls on the open line. In half an hour, addressing the deadly toxic drug crisis. There's been more investment in treatment and recovery beds. What's been your experience in trying to access a recovery home for yourself or a loved one? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And you can call us right now on our open line. How can BC meet growing demand for energy? And are you changing your own energy consumption? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone, by email bctoday@cbc.ca, or by text 236-330-2623. We begin, though, with a deadly earthquake in Taiwan, the strongest there in decades. The more than 7 magnitude earthquake collapsed buildings, heavily damaged roads and tunnels, and triggered landslides. 9 people were killed and nearly 1,000 injured. Video of the moment the quake struck shows vehicles shaking on roads, sending people scrambling, and nearby buildings collapsing. The quake was centered off the coast of the rural Huawi County and also affected the capital of Taipei. Joining me now is Han Cao, a seismologist and research scientist with the Geological Survey of Canada. He also studied geophysics in Taiwan. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell me what went through your mind when you learned of this massive earthquake in Taiwan?
Well, certainly it's heartbroken. I grew up in Taiwan, and for all the people living in Taiwan, we are no strangers to big earthquakes. But unfortunately, big earthquakes do bring damages, fatalities, and injuries, and so on. So it's always heartbroken to have this kind of news.
I'm sorry for you having learned about the impact of this in Taiwan, where you grew up. Do you have personal connections there now?
Yes, I do. We still have relatives in Taiwan, specifically in Kaohsiung City and in Taipei City. And my relatives told me that the shaking was just tremendously large. They feel it's almost like as strong as the devastating 1999 Chichi earthquake. But fortunately, the epicenter of this particular earthquake is located in eastern part of Taiwan, where the population is not as dense. But still, I think we have already learned quite a bit of damage and fatality in different areas due to building collapse. That's very unfortunate.
Yes, and the 1999 earthquake you referred to was just a little more severe, 7.5, and it killed 2,400 people. What can you tell me about the Hualien County that was the epicenter here? We've seen pictures and video of buildings that basically look like they're tilted over and folded over.
That's right. Hualien is actually located right around the corner where the Eurasia plate colliding with the Philippine Sea plate, and that's the place where we have a lot of earthquakes, big and small, and it's a very, very active place in terms of plate tectonics. So no, we do not feel very surprised to have big earthquakes in that particular part of the island. Unfortunately, strong shaking always have this kind of a potential damage to buildings, and that's what happened. And I think even though Taiwan has a very robust building code system, and it also has a very nice early warning system, but still we cannot prevent the collapse of every building. So it seems like something bad will happen if the earthquake is this big, which is 7.4 in this particular case.
Yes.
But I think what the lesson we learned is that we definitely want to make sure that the building codes are strengthened, and therefore we can prevent collapse of buildings.
And these disasters, they resonate so much for British Columbians. Many have connections and ties to Taiwan, like yourself. Generally, we all think of the fact that we are in an earthquake zone. So what are, what should British Columbians be thinking of right now then?
That's a very excellent question. I think definitely every time a big earthquake occurred somewhere else in the other part of the world, we should learn the lesson and therefore try to make sure that no tragedies like that happened here at BC. I think the biggest lesson that we want to learn, of course, is that we should definitely improve and strengthen our building code so that collapse of buildings will be minimized as much as possible. I think the other thing is that when earthquake happens, things will fall, and broken glasses and all these things will actually injure people. So we want to make sure that people do know that when earthquake happens, they have to follow the typical procedure to drop, to hold on, and to drop and cover and hold on. I think these are the steps that we definitely want everybody to practice on their instinct so that when earthquake happens, they know how to protect themselves.
There have been aftershocks and more are expected. What should officials be doing now in Taiwan to mitigate more damage?
Generally speaking, earthquakes happen, especially big ones, will be followed by a number of strong aftershocks as well. Usually, the aftershock magnitude will be about 1 unit smaller than the main shock and gradually die down as time goes on. But even for a magnitude of 7.4 earthquake, some of the strong aftershocks can be 6 or 5, and that can still cause quite a bit of shaking. So I think for this is particularly important for rescue teams because they have to go into these damaged buildings for rescue mission. And I think understanding the risk and how to avoid further damage will be the most important thing for the rescue team.
I really appreciate hearing from you and hope that everybody, all your relatives, stay safe. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Han Cao is a seismologist and research scientist with the Geological Survey of Canada. He also grew up in Taiwan. It's 12:14, 1:14 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. And do stay with us on CBC Radio 1. The afternoon shows in your region will have more on today's top stories. And here's what's coming up on the Coast at 3 o'clock in Metro Vancouver.
Michelle, hello there. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I wanted to let you know what's coming up on the Coast this afternoon. Lots of talk about the carbon tax this week. Of course, we're going to hear how big businesses and industry groups feel about the increase in the carbon tax this week. And you know how sometimes we call our friend group our chosen family? Well, today we are going to meet 2 Vancouver women. They have been best friends for decades, and they just found out they're actually half sisters after they got back some surprising 23andMe results. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. Join us between 3 and 6 for On the Coast.
That sounds lovely, Gloria. Thank you very much. And you can hear On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver and anywhere in the province. You'll find it on the CBC Listen app. Well, right now, BC Hydro is holding a news conference, and it is taking place right this moment. BC is taking steps to expand its renewable energy supply. We're asking, is it enough? Right now in Victoria, BC's energy minister is joining the president of BC Hydro, and they've just announced that they're looking for pitches from operators who can provide additional electricity supply in our province. Now, you may remember last year, BC Hydro spent $450 million to import power from California. It was able to put some of that power into surplus, which it used during our cold snap here in BC. But it did cause some fears about our province's capacity. We're going to hear more about what's being announced today, and we want to hear from you as well. How can we meet our growing demand for energy in BC? How are you changing your own energy consumption? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. By email, it's bctoday@cbc.ca, or you can text us at 236-330-2623. For more on today's announcement, I'm joined now by Colleen Giraud-Schmidt. She's the board chair of Clean Energy BC, as well as VP of Corporate Relations for the renewable energy company Innergex. She's also chair of BC's Climate Solutions Council. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
Well, tell us about what's happening right now. What is BC Hydro looking for in this process? I know that your executive director is at the press conference right now.
Yeah, so the announcement today is that BC will be proceeding with a competitive procurement process for 3,000 gigawatt hours of new electricity, emission-free, that meets the definition in our Clean Electricity Act that we have in the province of British Columbia. That power will need to be in service between 2028 and 2031. And so this will now start a process where companies like the one I work for in my day job, Innergex Renewable Energy, with our Indigenous partners, will be able to bid projects for a competitive procurement.
So essentially a request for proposals from private operators.
Private operators with Indigenous partners. And so what's unique in BC's history with this procurement is that there will be a requirement for a minimum of 25% Indigenous equity. We have projects in this province. We're privileged at Innergex to have 2 that are co-owned with Indigenous partners already. So there's a strong track record and history of this happening. But this is the first time for British Columbia that it's been a requirement of the proposal.
Okay. And what is our history with turning to private operators for energy?
Quite a long one. So private owned and developed projects started coming into the system here in the late 1990s. We then saw a series of competitive procurements that ran through the 2000 to 2010.
Things like those small run-of-river projects?
Yep, run-of-river. We've also got several operating wind farms in the province as well from that generation. And the last big competitive procurement was the 2008 Clean Power Call. There was then a program called the Standing Offer Program that was for smaller projects with a maximum of 15 megawatt size that happened through the first part of the teens. And then it's been pretty quiet in the province since then for our sector.
Why has BC Hydro struggled in recent months and have had to turn to a place like California?
So I think what we're all seeing is that the effects of climate change have happened a lot faster than what was anticipated and forecast for. And so we've had a drought in this province for many, many months now. That's impacted the availability of water in the province. And in a hydro-rich system like we have, where we rely on hydropower for the bulk of our electricity, that's causing some stresses in the system. Hence underscoring how important it is to start to add other forms of generation into the mix, like more wind and solar.
And when would these projects be up and running then?
So for this procurement, they're looking for projects to be in service between 2028 and 2031.
Okay. What do we do in the meantime?
We have to continue to rely on our partners, I think, and be innovative about how we use our electricity, look at additional ways to shorten the delivery timeline. Part of why we have that lag might feel like a long time between procurement and delivery is that we have quite a robust permitting process here in this province. It takes many, many years to move through. And so I think there's a lot of pieces we can do collectively to try to shorten those timelines and get more more energy in service faster.
Okay, my guest is Colleen Giraud-Schmidt, board chair with Clean Energy BC, and they're participating in this press conference being held by BC Hydro and the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Initiatives right now. She's also VP of an energy company, renewable energy company, VP for Corporate Relations with Intergex. And we are asking you, given increasing demand for energy in BC, how can the province meet that demand? What do we need to do? And what are the ways that you are changing your own energy consumption? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And Basil is joining us first in Vancouver. Hi, Basil.
Hi. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you willing to listen to my comments. Thanks.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on energy demand and ways that we can save?
Well, I appreciate that question. Yes, I appreciate Pauline coming to the so-called expert, I would hope, coming and speaking and hearing us and helping us. My concern is everyone who they want to save money, people want to keep warm, but there's so many things we can do to cut down on the energy to do that. And for instance, wearing warm clothes inside. You wear them outside to keep warm. Why not wear them inside? Wear a toque if you need to. Sweaters, warm socks, and whatever.
Yeah. Is that what you did when we had the cold snap? It was temperatures.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You don't have to keep putting the heat up. You don't have to have the heat up quite high at night in bed. Just get lots of more warm clothes in bed. Just as, warming up with a simple hot water bottle even. Cut down on your use your showers. You don't have to have a shower every other day. Once a week is plenty. A lady doctor told my wife that years ago. Having short showers when you use an elevator. We live way up high in a building. Mm-hmm. When I ever use the elevator, I go as high as anybody else is going. You can't get them to come out of the elevator and suggest they walk. They may have reasons why they can't. But at least I can, instead of going way up on the 25th floor.
You just use your legs. Basil, thank you so much. A lot of personal tips there, ways that he's trying to conserve energy himself where he lives. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think we've grown up through an era where we had an abundance of many things, and so we take it for granted. And so one of the things as we're heading forward into this next era and our relationship with energy is evolving, we're seeing an increase in disruption with climate. We're seeing summer peaks now that we didn't have in this province where we have heating needs as much as we have cooling needs. And I think it's really looking at how do we most efficiently utilize the energy we have. One great way to be more efficient with energy is transitioning to more renewable electricity, because electricity is far more efficient. So we will actually use less energy if you use, like for an example, I have an electric car. My car is far more efficient with its use of energy because most of it's going into that propulsion of distance. It's not getting wasted in heat, which a traditional combustion engine car does. And so as we're transitioning, we'll use less, which actually ends up being more cost effective for all of us because we're paying for less units of energy.
Okay. Greg is up next in Victoria. What are your thoughts on our energy consumption and how we are changing our ways of using energy, Greg?
Thank you for having me as a caller. I've been in the solar industry for over 20 years now, and here in Victoria. I appreciate what Colleen is doing and her group. We are a solar provider, a company called B Solar here in Victoria. We've been very successful the last decade, and with the combination of federal incentives, 0% financing, and $5,000 cash rebate on top of that.
Right. Are you finding more demand then? Are you finding more demand?
Yeah, we've doubled in size every year for the last 6 years. So, we've grown to quite a big company. We're the solar division of a 40-year-old electrical contractor, Brewis Electric Company.
Why do you think that's grown so much, Greg? Is it, I read something about, people using heat pumps and, being concerned about the use of energy there. So perhaps turning to solar panels. Is that true?
Absolutely. Well, the government rebates and the funding for solar also include any home energy efficiency upgrades. So what we're seeing is probably more than 60% of our clients also integrate a heat pump into that equation. So they're switching from oil and gas or even baseboard resistance heaters to high efficiency heat pumps, and then letting solar take care of the electrical demand, because BC Hydro also provides full retail net metering credits, so you don't have to store the energy. There's no batteries needed. We push any excess energy out onto the grid, which allows kilowatt-hour credits to accumulate in the summer months.
Greg, you've done a good job of laying out the benefits from your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us from Victoria. I want to ask you, here's Greg saying, yes, demand has really increased for solar panels. You deal with various renewable energy sources, wind as well. What's it been like trying to get more renewable energy off the ground in BC? Because it has been slow going.
It has been, but we're at an inflection point, and I think this is something that we're experiencing globally. Everywhere is looking for more electricity and more renewable, non-emitting energy quickly right now. And so right across Canada, every province is booming in terms of opportunity. BC as well. I think what we're seeing, it's not just a government push saying we're doing this for climate reasons and for reliability reasons. It's also the customers are saying, hey, this is the product I want. And so it's homeowners, yes, looking to change how they're powering their lives and heating their homes, but it's also business looking for making sure that they have low emission energy to meet their own ESG and shareholder requirements. And so it's a different world than we've seen before. And the challenge now is, can we move fast enough as a province to continue to be a competitive place for businesses to come to, for that capital to be invested, and to make sure we have the reliable, cost-effective, emission-free energy that British Columbians need?
Reliability is one question that will be on people's minds for sure. Let's head up north, where demand for energy, especially in those cold winters, is high. And Doug is joining us from Dawson Creek. Hi, Doug. Hi, Doug. Are you there? Doug, are you on the line? Okay. I think we've lost our connection to Doug. His question was, does BC Hydro reimburse homeowners for solar panels and adding to the system? I think that was something that our previous caller touched on as well. And that may be why Doug has hung up. Kevin is up next in Edgewood. And what do you do to change your own energy consumption, Kevin?
Well, I got 4 solar panels and I use propane. And if anything goes wrong, I go to my other spot where I lived, which is right beside me, and it's a wood stove. It's either wood or solar. And it hasn't cost me anything.
Okay. And wood stoves, I mean, there have been issues with wood stoves in the Lower Mainland, for example, right?
Yeah, and I think there it's collectively, when we're living close to each other, there's different requirements on air quality and those pieces. So,
Kevin, and when did you obtain solar panels, Kevin?
About 6 years ago.
What led you to do that?
Well, being on disability, I can't afford anything. My disability is a certain amount, and everybody else is getting a raise on their checks, whatnot, except for the seniors and people on disability and that. So I only have so much to live off of.
So it was a cost incentive for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Kevin, thank you so much for the call. You take care in Edgewood, okay?
Absolutely.
That's Kevin in Edgewood. Lovely to hear from you. And so, Colleen, what is next in this process? And, what is your company, proposing, and what's next for you?
Yeah, so for Clean Energy BC's members, the private companies have been working with Indigenous partners on potential projects. That work will continue now that we've seen the final requirements for the procurement. So what exactly BC Hydro is looking for, what the evaluation criteria will be. Those bids will be submitted to BC Hydro. I believe the date's September 16th. It might have changed since the last version I saw before what's being announced today. But so we'll put forward our best proposals there for how we're going to meet the requirement. And then my understanding is BC Hydro will evaluate those until mid-December, and then we'll announce which projects are successful. The projects with the successful contracts offered will then get very, very busy trying to move through the robust permitting process we have here in British Columbia to be able to get their projects permitted and constructed to meet the in-service dates.
That would be through BCUC?
Nope, that's separate. So
Okay.
BCUC will give their blessing
BC
on it, but
Hydro.
then utility scale wind projects at the moment would
I
go
see.
through an environmental assessment process here in British Columbia.
I guess at the root of it is, what does this mean for the consumer?
So for consumers, I guess, rest assured that there's more energy coming. And I think the gap we're in right now is a short-term era of maybe not having enough in province because of the lag time between the planning and the need and how long it takes to have projects in service. But we do have a robust potential resource here in British Columbia. We are blessed with wind and sun and water, offshore, tidal, geothermal. There's a suite of potential forms of renewable energy to be harnessed here in the province. I mean, it's something that can touch every corner of the province as well. So if we get going with initiating a series of ongoing procurements, which is what we're looking for government to move on to next after this one has been issued, that will unleash the ability for companies like Interjax and nations across the province to be able to invest in developing those projects.
Really appreciate having you on the show and explaining this for us as the press conference is still happening. Thanks so much.
No problem, my pleasure.
Colleen Giro-Schmidt is board chair of Clean Energy BC and VP of Corporate Relations for the renewable energy company Interjax. And yes, we'll keep an eye on that news conference with BC Hydro and the Climate Change and Energy Minister Josie Osborne as well. Much more on CBC throughout the day. 12:32 now, 1:32 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. Coming up in our next half hour, we will talk about the toxic drug crisis here in our province, and we'll discuss trying to access recovery and treatment. What has that been like for you? And what will this new infusion of funding from the province mean for those recovery facilities? We're going to hear from one coming up as well. Right now, it's time for a CBC News update, and here's Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. People forced out of the homeless encampment at Vancouver's Crab Park will be allowed back in tomorrow after the city completed a cleanup. The city says crews removed more than 90,000 kilograms of debris and material, 20 propane tanks and 6 generators. Officials say shelter sites are now clearly marked for each of the 27 residents. Fresh gravel has also been laid to improve drainage and prevent muddy conditions. Police in Kamloops are releasing details about a major drug trafficking bust last month. Over a 4-day period, 27 people were arrested and more than 2 kilos of cocaine, fentanyl, and what's believed to be meth were seized. Several weapons were also confiscated. And BC's Transportation Ministry says heavy commercial trucks will soon require devices that limit their speed. The new requirement comes into effect Friday for trucks around 12,000 kilograms and built after 1994. The device will limit speeds to 105 kilometers an hour. And now the forecast on the north coast, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with a high of 7, highs to 7 degrees with strong winds and sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 5, highs up to 13 and mainly cloudy in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 12. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, some sun and cloud this afternoon with highs around 10 degrees. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
It is a lovely day downtown, the kind of day
It
where
is.
you just are able to appreciate those cherry blossoms. Have you seen
Beautiful. Yes, I have seen them.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
out at Queenie Park on the weekend. Beautiful. Right around all that area there.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely gorgeous. It was just everywhere over the long weekend, and it feels like they weren't there, and then suddenly they just burst wide open, and here we were surrounded by pink blossoms.
It's fantastic.
So nice.
It is.
Yeah. Feels like you're amidst a pink cloud.
Something like that.
Something
Yes.
like that.
Pink cloud.
Yeah, that's how I describe it. I get all trippy when I'm around cherry
apparently,
blossoms. Apparently
yes.
so. Okay, let's pivot from that then. Rob, thank you very much. Enjoy
You're
those
welcome.
cherry blossoms this afternoon.
Thanks, Michelle.
Rob
See you.
Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I hope you enjoy those cherry blossoms as well as you're out and about in your part of Metro Vancouver. Just gorgeous, honestly. I was walking around Burnaby Parks on the weekend and just really taking them in. Pink in your day, I mean, what a difference it makes. This is BC Today, and we have some more emails actually on our last topic on BC Hydro. And Chris wrote us, and Chris says, public institutions such as schools and government buildings should be mandated to turn off all their lights during the nighttime. Other places, such as parking lots, should also turn off their lights. This would also benefit wildlife. And Scott writes, as an electrical engineer working with utilities for 20 years, the best way to manage energy is through distributed energy resources like solar, wind, and batteries. Thanks so much for your emails. BC Today at cbc.ca. This is BC Today here, and I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for joining us. And you can call us right now on our second topic for this half hour. We are asking you, what has been your experience in accessing recovery and treatment beds for either yourself or a loved one? We're going to speak with a recovery home operator in a moment, but we're asking you on the open line. You can dial us up now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, if you'd like to email us, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. You can text us as well, 236-330-2623. And yes, sadly, BC's toxic drug crisis continues to grow, with more than 2,500 people dying from illicit drugs last year. Now, amid the crisis, there continues to be criticism of a lack of treatment and recovery beds. Now, this year, the BC government says its budget is investing $117 million for mental health and addiction beds. The funding would go to registered operators who are registered under the Community Care and Assisted Living Act. There are about 300 in BC. We're going to hear from an operator in a moment. We'd also like to hear from you again on the open line, and you can tell us about your experience in trying to access treatment and recovery. Let us know as well what has worked. What do you think needs to improve about the system? And if you'd like to email us instead, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. Cheryl Diebel is the director of the New Roads Therapeutic Recovery Center in Victoria. And Cheryl joins us now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being with us. First, can you tell us about the New Roads Therapeutic Recovery Center? What kind of facility is it?
Certainly. It is a long-term treatment facility for men. Currently, we have 40 men here, and it's 9 to 24 months long, so it's intensive treatment. The men who come here are experiencing severe substance misuse. As well, they may have some mental health issues. They likely have a connection with the criminal justice system at some point, or may come directly from jail. And they will likely have experienced or come directly from homelessness as well. So there's a complexity of the client that we serve here at New Roads. We also have funding that is for a women's program that will open later this year. That will be very similar, a separate program, but similar in terms of length of stay and intensity, as well as the type of people that we'll be serving. It's a program that has individual counseling. We have a lot of group work. We are a therapeutic community model. So we work under the context of community is the model in which the treatment happens. So when the men do a lot of work as a larger group and working in community, they also work within the community context in terms of taking care of the property. And we have chickens and we have bees and things like that.
Yeah, tell me more about what it looks
like. Working in the kitchen. It is got a beautiful center courtyard. It used to be a young offender prison years ago, and then it's been substantially remodeled. So in the center of it, there's a large courtyard that has like a pond, and we have a large greenhouse, and we have, as I mentioned before, chickens and bees and things like that. It's quite beautiful.
And you talk about it being a community therapy model. What does that mean? Can you go into more detail about what that means for the men who are staying there? What is a day like?
Absolutely. So typically on any given day, the men meet as a large community in the morning, and then as well in the evening. They do group work with the counselors that work here. We have registered therapists, and they do group work with them throughout the kind of Monday to Friday in the mornings. In the afternoons, they do work as therapy. So they work on a certain area, like maybe it's outside or in the kitchen, things like that, but always within that community context. So they're always working in terms of giving back to the community in which they're living. And so when men come here, they're working initially on their own self in terms of kind of how they got here, where they're at. Then they learn about our community context and how we work here. And once they've kind of figured out themselves in terms of how they're here, they start looking at working within our community. And then towards the end of their stay, they're looking at going back into the general community outside of New Roads. And we do a transitional program to help them achieve that towards the end of their stay.
What does that community work look like?
The community work in terms of how it happens here is that just as I'm the director of the program, the men have a leadership structure here. So they actually have a role within the community. They might be if they're the house lead or assistant house lead, they hold the highest levels within the community, and they kind of help the things function here and help men work through some of the issues. So they're giving back to the community as they're doing their own work on themselves. And there's other roles within the community, like there's an outside lead where that person is the person who helps orchestrate how the outside work happens for taking care of the gardens and the chickens and things like that. There's kitchen leads and they work with our chef. And so the people within the community context have a role in terms of giving back into the community, and it gives them purpose.
That's what I was going to ask is why is that important? Why is that such an integral part of the recovery there?
I think for all of us, we need purpose when we get up in the morning. We need to have that sense of purpose. And a lot of times with people who have experienced severe drug use, they've become very disconnected. And the opposite of addiction is connection. Because typically when they come here, they have no connection left with their family, with the kind of the community in general. Sometimes with their own children or their wife, their sister, their mother, their father. And so what we help them achieve is that sense of purpose in terms of the work that they do here. And then they take the connections that they're able to make here and then start getting reconnected to the other people in their life outside of here, like their family, their friends, perhaps an old employer, those kind of things. And it's that sense of purpose that they learn, I think, through the work that they do here within the community, as well as the work that they do in the work as therapy program we have here, that gives them that sense of purpose. And then they can kind of build upon that as they prepare to leave.
My guest is Cheryl Diebel, director of the New Roads Therapeutic Recovery Center. That's in Victoria. And we're asking you for yourself, what has been your experience in trying to access treatment and recovery for substance use, and what has worked or what needs to improve about the system. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Jim is calling us from Nelson. Hi, Jim. Welcome.
Hello.
Tell us a bit about what do you want to say about recovery centers and seeking treatment?
Recovery centers are a very good solution for many people. I have friends that have tried to get sober, get clean, and the only thing that worked was...
Jim, are you there? Hi, Jim. We are trying to reconnect with Jim in Nelson. Hi, Jim, are you... Okay, my apologies, Jim. I know that you were waiting for a while there, so I apologize for the lost connection. We're going to try and reconnect with him in a moment, but he was talking about his friends who had been seeking treatment and had gone to treatment facilities, and he was calling us from Nelson. We are trying to reconnect with Jim. If you want to give us a call as well, let us know what your experience has been like in trying to access treatment and recovery in BC. And have you been able to access a recovery home for yourself or a loved one? It's 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Cheryl Diebel is with me with New Roads Therapeutic Center in Victoria. And when we talk about accessing, Cheryl, what is the demand like? Because we hear about the lack of beds.
Yes, absolutely. There's a demand for beds, I think, across the whole province, and specifically here in South Island, there's a high demand for beds. And so I don't see that going away at anytime soon. There has been some movement in terms of opening up beds. So the government announced not very long ago opening 180 new beds across the province. 20 of those are the women's program that I referenced earlier that will be opening later this year. So I see that as a piece of hope in terms of the future, in terms of being able to access beds. There's certainly the demand. We're already getting phone calls about the women's program because people want in, and we are still in the renovation stage, so we're a ways out from accepting people. But yes, the demand is absolutely there.
And what does that mean, having to, people calling you already about the women's program? What does it mean for people to be waiting?
For us, we try and help them in terms of giving them other resources that they might be able to access. So that's important to be able to do that. And we do help them in terms of referring them elsewhere. Unfortunately for women on the island, there is no long-term bed. So if they require long-term treatment, they have to go to the mainland for that. And so that's why it's so significant to get these 20 beds that we are going to be opening up here. But yeah, what we do is try and support them in finding something that will work for them today, rather than them having no supports at all.
We have quite an emotional email here from a parent saying, I've contacted every single agency in Vancouver to ask for help for my son who is on the streets. He's now in psychosis. I took him twice to the VGH psych department and they wouldn't admit him. And he has psychosis due to drug use. And this has resulted in him running through a window, landing on the roof of an adjacent building. And that was the beginning of his downward spiral. He wants help. I cannot get him help. I have exhausted all options. We have not abandoned him. He has a family who loves him. He's been abandoned by society. What do you say to someone like that who is trying desperately to find help for their loved one?
Well, it sounds like this parent has done a lot in terms of trying to connect their son in the different areas. And it can be sometimes difficult because sometimes certainly the system is not always easy to access, but as well, it also is a point in time for many of the people that we deal with. In some cases, we've worked with people for up to a year to get them here because they'll want to come and then they change their mind, or we may not have a bed. When we have the bed, we can't locate them, and those kind of things. It's really difficult to manage when somebody is in active addiction in terms of trying to get them in through the doorway. Sometimes it can be a system issue, and sometimes it's the person themselves. So there's lots of different challenges around that. I would say to them to just keep trying for sure, both with their son as well as within the system itself. And I know sorry.
But pardon me, apart from, we know about the funding, but what needs to improve so that when someone is that desperate, going to emergency, we hear this all the time, right? From emergency room staff, that's where people go because there's nowhere else.
Right. I think the change with the funding, whether it's the 180 beds as well as there's change in both registered and licensed beds, increasing the funding from government starting June 1st is going to help operators to better stabilize their programs and be able to accept people in a more timely fashion, as will the new 180 beds will be able to access in a more timely fashion, whether that person is going through detox or that person is going through the hospital, that there's actually a bed available. It's going to help the availability of beds throughout the province.
We actually have reconnected with Jim and Nelson. Jim, thank you very much for calling us back. And you were saying that you have friends who have sought treatment at treatment centers. Is that right?
That's correct. And I guess my main point here is that, as was mentioned there just a moment ago, the window of opportunity to recover, it's a very tenuous thing. A person may decide they want to recover. Things get really bad. They have an opportunity to get into treatment or possibly just go to a 12-step meeting or LifeRing or some of the peer support groups. But very often, if that window of opportunity closes, it could be unpredictable in terms of when they would be willing again to try to get recover.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And yourself, what have you encountered when it comes to your friends and your community?
It's a mixed bag, right? From people that can recover from an addiction right away to people that try and eventually die. It's the whole spectrum.
So how important is it then we hear about, new funding, adding beds, hopefully to increase that availability? How can we ensure we get into that window of opportunity, as you say? It is so critical.
Well, one of the other things that is available and ongoing peer support is most important, and making connection. As was mentioned, addiction is an isolating illness. And so if a person accesses a local community, such as Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, LifeRing, and for the families, you have Al-Anon and you have Holding Hope, the support groups for family members of addiction. These resources are available immediately. There's no waiting. And in addition to face-to-face meetings, there's Zoom. Ever since the pandemic, Zoom has really picked up, and there's Zoom meetings 24 hours a day.
Yeah, that peer counseling and mentoring. Jim, why is this so important to you?
Well, an addiction it's a permanent situation. One of my opinion, anyway, is that I'm always going to be an alcoholic for the rest of my life. I can't pick up that first drink, and the participation in recovery programs is really what gives me some meaning in my life. I can help with my experience to help other people that want to get recovered, and it's just a very gratifying experience.
Wow, it's been so illuminating to speak with you. Thank you very much. I'm so glad we were able to connect.
Thank you.
All the best to you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Take care. That importance of peer mentorship and peer support. Cheryl, did you want to touch on that?
Certainly. I think it fits really well in the context of the community work and the therapeutic community model that we use. As well, Jim pointed out some really valuable information in terms of the resources that are accessible within the community 24 hours a day, and those peer support groups. We actually also run all of those types of groups here at the center, so that when men leave, they already have a connection through NA, CA, AA, Smart Recovery, Life Rings, all of those kind of peer support programs. And they can follow them once they leave here. They can be connected to those groups ongoing.
Okay.
So there are ongoing resources that can be accessed at any point.
Jim, thank you again. Jacqueline is calling us now in Kimberley. Hi, Jacqueline. And I understand you are an addictions counselor.
Hi, yes.
So what are your thoughts on trying to access the treatment system in BC?
For myself personally, I am very grateful that I had a computer and the internet, and so, I was able to navigate the system myself. I did have some counseling that gave me some assistance. I didn't have to wait super long.
You have personal experience with this then?
Yeah, so I've been in and out of addiction for probably 30 years of my life, as a teenager, etc. I'm right now in 7 years of recovery. I've just graduated from university at University of Lethbridge. I was working in harm reduction for the last 4 years, as well as in the mental health and substance use for interior health. And I've seen the gambit of what mental health and substance use and people trying to get into the system and having difficulty or being kicked out because they had difficulty in stopping using. The point I would I think what we need is more transitional housing and more options for aftercare. A lot of times people say if they were living vulnerably, they then have to return to the same homeless shelter that they were sick in, essentially. Or you can't, if we were to transplant a plant and put it, tend to it and do all these lovely things and a lot of self-care, etc., and then put it back into the same sick environment, it's very difficult to stay well. And so my community personally, I'm in Kimberley, I work in Cranbrook, and we don't have limited opportunities for treatment facilities. We have Recovery Ranch, which is a fantastic environment. It's run by EHN, and it's absolutely wonderful, but it's a little bit out of the price range for some folks. And so if you want to go to a government-funded facility, you'll have to leave the community, go to either the Okanagan or the Lower Mainland, and that can be really difficult if you have children, if you have animals or a job that you need to leave.
Right.
I was very lucky, and so I had family that was able to care for my children while I was gone for 60 days. I have nothing but good things to say about treatment when you're ready. But as your previous caller said, oftentimes the wait list and the willingness don't line up. And so we need to kind of, I don't know.
How did it?
As an addiction counselor, I feel like it's a multi-pronged approach that we need to kind of access instead of just treatment or just abstinence-based recovery. We need to see people where they're at more and see recovery in a lens of, being in wealth, even if it is still using substances in a different way.
Jacqueline, I have 20 seconds. I want to ask you, though, what keeps you going now? How are you doing and what keeps you going?
I tell myself the story that I cannot, and my children cannot see another relapse. I've built so much over the last 7 years. I've bought a house. I've graduated. I just want to be an example for people that change can happen.
You
and
sure?
I just really love to inspire. I'm actually starting my own private practice called True Heart Resource and Support.
Jacqueline, you are an example, absolutely, and congratulations on your new practice. Jacqueline in Kimberley.